Hi guys, welcome to Economic Times SmallBiz section's Facebook Live on cybersecurity. And joining me today is Saket Modi from Lucideus Tech. Saket Modi is an ethical hacker and runs one of the premier security solutions company in India. So Saket, my first question to you would be, should small businesses actually look at cybersecurity? I mean, why would anyone want to hack them?
So small businesses and individual again becomes two entire different kinds of threats. I'll address both of them because I'm sure that that will be of interest to people watching. The first one, when you mention small businesses, in general, it is absolutely correct that if a hacker wants to hack, he would always want to go with a Fortune 500 company, or if not a Fortune 500 global company, probably a local Fortune 500 in India, Fortune 500, or in Africa, Fortune 500, or something like that. Because again, there is much more to hack and blackmail people with ransomware and things like that. Small businesses really, what we have seen, get targeted not because of specialized attacks which happen with them as a target, but something which is more generically spread out and people don't realize that. For example, I'll give you a very simple example. When you start a small business, one of the most obvious things that you require is a accounting software, right? Now, it's very general tendency. Again, I'm not saying everybody does it, but a lot of people, it's very normal to go to a torrent website to try to find the cracked version of a Tally or any of the generically available softwares which are there, and they try to install that cracked version. Now, in general, what is that cracked version? If we understand, there was some hacker somewhere who reverse engineered the executable file of Tally. If you understand how the authentication works inside a software, it simply takes your input as the key, and if there's an if-else loop which is there, that if the input key is equal to this number, allow them to go in, else say that it's a wrong password that has been entered. The hacker simply reverse engineers this, and in that code itself, it simply makes that condition reverse. So what it does is that if whatever is being entered is not equal to that particular password, or you can see the password a lot of times also, but if it's not equal to the password, then let them go in. So whatever you enter, you just go in. That's the word. That's the meaning of a cracked software. Now what he does additionally is, because it's an executable file, he binds it with a malware, so that when you click on the file, and because it's an executable and you have to give it permissions to install it, you are thinking that you are installing a cracked version of Tally, while the fact is you're of course doing that, but along with that you're also installing a backdoor or a malware on your system which is a part of your network, and then the guy starts monitoring you. That computers, keystrokes, their files, their web camera for that matter, all of that can easily be monitored when you have clicked on the executable. And it doesn't matter what firewall, antivirus, or what operating system and how latest the operating system or a genuine copy of operating system you have, it really becomes very simple if you click on that. So that is a very generic way that we have seen that this was of course one small example. Like when you download pirated software, in general it is binded by these malwares, and you reverse connect to the hacker. So that's like a very generic threat that we've seen. So that's something that we should be very, very concerned about, and of course buy only things from the right and the authentic sources. That's on the business side. There is a long list, but again I'll just stick one from the business. And on the personal side, it is really still as basic as a phishing attack. So we've seen hundreds of cases where something which looks very obvious, if I tell you today that, if you get a email from an anonymous person, don't click on that, and as obvious as it might sound for everybody seeing this, that come on, we would never click on an anonymous email. The point is, today, because of the sophistication of the spear phishing attacks which are possible, it doesn't have to be an anonymous email anymore. All I have to do is just do a little bit of reconnaissance, just do a little bit of information gathering about you on your social media to find out who your close friend is, or who your spouse or your sibling is. And it's very simple to send a spoofed email. Even a 5th standard child can do that. Just go to YouTube and type how to send a fake mail. You'll probably have thousands of videos out there, and it's really that simple. So you can simply see that there are ways by which you can go ahead and send a mail from somebody very close to you, and you will see that email. You will not even feel that this is a fake email, but the mail will say that here are the pictures from the last time that we met, and the moment you click there, that's good enough to, again, at a lot of times to be able to penetrate and infiltrate into your system, and that still remains the top thread that people should be worried about. Yeah.
Right. So if I can take a few questions.
Sure.
Adrian says, can we build a safer cyber world? Navina says, would it not be very expensive for a startup which is already burning cash to invest in cybersecurity?
Okay, the first question, is it possible to build a safer cyber world? It's like asking, is it possible to make a safer physical world? It's because, again, cyber is still only 25 years old, and when that is the case, I think we're still far away to call the cyber world a safe world. So I feel it'll still take time, and but we will learn, we will mature. There will be dozens of Sonys and Ashley Madisons and targets, which has to happen, unfortunately, but that's the fact, because we work with a lot of very, very large companies, and what comes out in the media is probably not even 1% of the kind of vulnerabilities and the kind of flaws which are there. And I'm talking about publicly listed multi-billion-dollar companies, and it's really scary. So it'll take us time to build a safe cyber world. Second part, somebody who's burning cash, is it worth spending on cybersecurity? It's like asking a question that you're running on a it's like if I ask you the question that look, if you're in a room and I suck out all the oxygen from the room, how much money are you willing to pay me to get back that oxygen? The answer is all the money that you have, plus probably you'll borrow everything you can from everybody and you'll give it to me. Why is that? Because there the question is about survival. Now, depending on the business model, and most business models today are based on the internet, on digital, out there spending on cybersecurity is no longer an option. It's no longer a luxury spend that you have. Unfortunately, a lot of people think of it like that, and that is where cases happen where a startup which is already funded probably and is looking at a break even after 5 years or 3 years. Imagine what would happen if their entire customer list would be made public, and people would be seeing the entire customer data, and their competitor would send an email to everybody who's there on that list, saying that I have a 20% off on the same product which the other e-commerce company is trying to provide. And because again, today it really doesn't matter which e-commerce you buy it from. If you're buying an Apple phone, you know that none of the e-commerce guys are making it. It's Apple who's making it, so you only want to go to the cheapest one. So that's my point, right? As it's not really an optional spend. However, you don't need to spend a fortune or a bomb for cybersecurity also. So how much is too much? Just to give you an idea also, it is, if I were to give you that as a factor of the total IT spend that you have, I'll come to startups. Just to give you about conventional companies, a manufacturing company would typically have a spend between 5 to 6% of the total IT spend as their cybersecurity budget. While on the other side, we've seen some extremely sophisticated banks in India and outside, where the total spend of IT, the percentage of that they spend on cybersecurity, it actually goes in the order of almost 20 to 25% also. So it's between 5% and 25% of your IT spend. Where do you fit in as a startup? That's a very relative question, because it really depends on the kind of startup at the stage at which you're in. Worst case scenario, you need a 5% spend. Best case scenario, you need a 25% 25% spend of your total IT spend. Yeah. The role of government in securing cyber. When you say securing anything in general, it's always the moral obligation of every kind of government. That's the reason we elect a government, for a sense of security, that we have our laws, we have our constitution and things in place. Especially when you talk about cyber and how do governments play their role. In general, I mean, again, as I told you, that we are in that first few decades of cyber, where things are still getting crystallized and materialized, and I think we're still far away where, for example, the Indian Penal Code, so the physical security aspect is been there, done that, and it's tried and tested. So the Indian Penal Code relatively is a very robust set of rules which really address the problems in the physical world, and you have punishments correspondingly in the IPC, which is clearly mentioned. But on the other side, when you talk about the Indian IT Act, which is the governing document when you do any cyber crime in India, that's something which comes out. So when that is the case, it is still maturing and evolving, and I think that's a natural transition that will take some time, but once that happens, that will be okay. One point which I'd like to make, that a lot of governments, including the US government, the Chinese government, if you know about the Mandiant report, which spoke about thousands of professionally deployed hackers, full-time hackers by the Chinese government, being used only to hack into external government and even private companies and their data. That is happening in a very big way. We all know about NSA by now, thanks to the Edward Snowden and the Julian Assanges, that what's happening with the US government, and there are different governments trying to do different things in that way. One general misconception which I see with people is being very scared that the NSA is listening to their conversations and reading their emails, or seeing their pictures on Facebook. And I really find it very, very funny. I'll tell you why I find that funny. It's because, you see, we are scared of the government reading our stuff, while the government under any circumstances is not a profit-making body. It is not something which has the agenda of making money. It doesn't have to respond to their shareholders saying that, look, where's my money? You've used my money, and where are you using it? What is the ROI that you can give me in terms of the investment on every share that I've made? While you are worried that the Gmail or Google, which is a private company, when I say private, it's publicly listed, but it's a profit-making company. When you're worried that government can see your Apple ID photos, while Tim Cook and Apple itself is a profit-making organization again. So people generally forget that you are storing your pictures free of cost at all of these large companies which are using those pictures, which have to be using those pictures to gather a lot of data, shoot ads to you, sell more products to you, and God knows what what all they can do with it. And they are of course doing whatever they can, because again you have voluntarily accepted, while accepting the terms and conditions while signing up on a Facebook, Google, or an Amazon, or any of those things. So I feel people should be more concerned about their pictures being seen by a Tim Cook or a Sundar Pichai rather than the NSA or the Indian government, because again, at least their agenda is not to make money. Out here, clearly the agenda of any company is to make money. That's the report card of any CEO, the balance sheet. So that is one general misconception which I always find, that people are so worried about the NSA and generally not even concerned about the fact that, look, they will see something which is there in the hands of a private guy, which is not a very wise thing. Yeah.
Right. So now that you've talked about governments, we increasingly see that this has become like a three-way contest between the US, Russia, and China. Where does India figure out in the scheme of things?
So yeah, I mean, when you talk about these three-way contests which are happening, however, those are things which come out in the media, and I can tell you there are players which don't feature in this trinity list, but extremely powerful. I don't have to mention about Israel. I don't have to mention about Singapore, and they're doing their bit. And there are power spots where a lot of tremendous research is happening. India, where does it fit in? So the techies which are used even in the US and probably not that much in China, but in a lot of European countries and their governments also are again from Indian origin, and I again am fortunate enough to be in touch with a lot of these people. So India as a government, as an organization, as a country, I feel we are still far away when you talk about the maturity when it comes to understanding and defending against cyber attacks, and very rightly so, because again we have not been subjected to as many cyber attacks as the US and the UK have been subjected, and this is again, you can clearly see the economy and the scale at which there's a huge difference for a hacker who's sitting somewhere in Russia or some country. I mean, for him it makes more sense to hack into a bank account in the US rather than India. So we haven't seen that much attacks. It's like the more you get attacked, the more you learn from it, and the more you do things proactively so that you don't get hacked again. So I feel we are still not as mature. But looking at how the entire Indian ecosystem is changing, how we are leapfrogging, that's where our UPI, our entire Digital India initiative comes into the picture. That's where our Prime Minister's Jan Dhan Yojana comes into the picture, where everybody is being given a bank account and you'll be able to transact things from your mobile phone in a very quick way. So when that is happening, I feel that we have to catch up, and we are already doing that. So if you really now go back and see these, NPCI for example is a brilliant body which has come up with some of the most path-breaking ways of making payments, and UPI is a recent example. And if you really see the entire technology focus and security focus in a body like NPCI, it is tremendous. It is massive. So I'm just trying to say that we are evolving, but probably we're still not there. But yeah, we'll get there soon is something which I can tell you for sure.
So why do I get this feeling that the bad guys are always ahead of the good guys in this case? Why does it seem like the hackers have a step in front of you?
So I'll tell you why, and you very rightly said that it's just the feeling. It's really not something which is I'll tell you why. Because you see, when you talk about securing an organization or a government or any body from cyber attacks, you are essentially trying to solve the problem of the entire periphery, the entire circumference, which is 2 pi r. Now when that is the case, you see, as a security guy, I have to look at people, process, technology. In technology, the entire stack, starting from the web servers, the endpoint, the routers, the switches, the web applications, the mobile applications, the thick client applications, the cloud, the Internet of Things devices, the SCADA systems which are there. The list is really very, very long. Not that I'm complaining of it, but let's understand that the entire ecosystem, what comprises of a technology stack of a company, is massive, and it's really and it's built on a lot of legacy systems also in large companies, that there are systems which have been there for 15 to 20 years, and you have to keep going with them because of whatever reasons, that the continuity has to be there. So that becomes the challenge while you're securing. If you're a hacker, the only thing you want is a small little flaw in one of the technology devices in the entire organization, and boom, you're inside. So that's the reason why, if he gets one vulnerability, it becomes glorified. Yes, it's our job to make sure that there is not even one vulnerability, but let's understand that becomes very, very difficult to do, because the pace at which the chief marketing officer is sitting on the head of the chief technology officer saying that, look, I want the app to be released as soon as possible. I want to make sure that there are as many people possible. I don't want complex passwords on my thing, because people will not be able to log in and I will lose my customers. Between security and convenience, and that becomes the challenge. And that's the reason why, if there's a small flaw found up by a hacker, it looks like, oh, there was no security at all, while that is not the case. And just the last part which I would say on this point is that, I always say that, security guy's job is generally like the job of Superman. You can be saving Earth from extraterrestrial cyber attackers at the night, but in the morning when you come in the office, nobody knows about it, and it's business as usual. So that's the reason, right? When the things are defended, it's like a goalkeeper's life, that the only things which are counted are the goals scored against you, rather than the number of goals that you've actually defended.
Right. Ahmed Faruddin asks, is security platform dependent? As I heard, Microsoft is more vulnerable. Pooja says, how do you overcome all these issues, especially on social networking websites?
Is security platform dependent? See, every platform has its own way in which it addresses security. The more popular a platform becomes, the more vulnerable it becomes to cyber attacks. So today, if you see the desktop or the laptops out there is no doubts that the Windows operating system is much more vulnerable than a Mac operating system, which is much more vulnerable than a generic CentOS or a Ubuntu operating system which is there. But this again has to do with the usage. The number of people who actually use Windows is much more than what they use OS X or Ubuntu. On the other side, if you really see on the mobile phones, more than Windows, I mean, the most vulnerable one is really the Android, because Android has the largest market share across the globe. And the more you use it, there are security flaws which are natural to come out. It's like, the more you use it, the more better it becomes, because the issues around it. So it's not that there is one particular platform which is more vulnerable. Every platform has its own vulnerabilities, but on the other side, the more popular a platform becomes, that means it's more easier to use also. That's the reason why it became popular in the first place. It would, a lot of things would come out which are still there in the other platforms, but it is still taking time for people to find that. So that is there on the platform side. The second question was
on social networking.
So social networking, how do you go ahead and secure yourself in the social networking side? See, again, there are multiple ways in which you want to secure yourself on the social media. Of course, the 101, the basics, right? You need to log out every time that you're online. Like every time you're not using your system, you need to log out of your this thing. You can't give access to third-party applications to take an access to your social media accounts. But again, I feel for social media, again, the most important thing becomes while you're having even a personal chat. It brings me back to the same point which I told you, that assume everything is hacked. The moment you can do that, the moment you can send and post a private picture also, when I say private picture, with the settings as private, with a couple of friends of yours, but you're okay if the world sees it also. I feel that is the only way in which you can really go ahead and secure yourself. Otherwise, there are always walkarounds and ways by which you can be hacked. Yeah.
We would have loved to carry on. We have still a lot of questions, but time constraints. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Saket.
Absolutely.